Hi, I'm Jess. Today we're opening up on ceremony for enthusiasts, iconoclasts, anarchists, and you. I can't even begin to tell you how excited I am to have you in my life. This is Katie Costello, Force of Nature, and Soul Midwife. Okay, so we're going to explain to you what Soul Midwife means to my lovely community, and you need to know because this is an absolutely brilliant thing. So I'm going to let you do the detail of what you do, but I know that what you mainly do is enable people to have the death that they want, maybe an easier time at the end of their life, and that you have all kinds of philosophies around how that should be done. So if I can ask you to tell our listeners who you are and what you do, and then we are going to throughout it talk about your new project, which I'm really excited about, you're really excited about. So me and Katie met very recently, actually. We kind of hooked up on Instagram in the local community with deaf professionals. And we met up for a coffee in Costa and we just ignited each other's passions, which was absolutely fantastic. And it's part of why I'm here and it's part of why she's here, just in that moment. So always treasure those moments. So would you like to introduce yourself, Katie?
Yes. That coffee was, like you said, we'd already connected and met. And then just having that coffee, like, both gave us something that we needed. So thank you for that as well. It's so powerful when you meet your tribe, when you connect with people that you do get on with, that you just get each other. And this work of death, dying, end of life, funerals is very niche, and it's certainly not everybody's cup of tea. So I always find it really valuable when I meet people that actually want to go, oh yeah, I want to talk about coffins and burial ground and is, and like, it's like, yeah, finally. So
it's like, oh, she's as weird as I am. Is what you're basically saying.
Yes, yeah, and I love it, and thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'm Katie. I'm based in Horsham in West Sussex, but I cover a lot of the southeast, doing what I do as a soul midwife and a funeral celebrant. So a soul midwife is essentially an end-of-life companion. Now, there's about 1,000 of us all over the UK. With our Felicity Warner, our founder and my friend and mentor, set up the school about 30 odd years ago. So this isn't something new. Soul midwives have been around for a long, long time. Essentially, there's nothing new age either about what we do. Sitting with the dying is something that we've always done as a community, as a culture, as society for hundreds of years. We've just forgotten the art of human connection when it comes to death. So Felicity set up the school, and like I said, there's 1,000 of us fully qualified, trained soul midwives now all over the world. And essentially what we do is sit with the dying. We can literally sit, hold their hand and just be present. We can go to appointments. We can help plan deaths, funerals, events, treatment. We can get as involved or not as people need or want us to be. The whole point is we're just extra. So we work alongside medical professionals.
You are definitely extra. You're extra.
I am extra. So
we both are, in a good way.
Yeah. I'm not sure everyone would agree. And we are that extra hand to hold, the extra ear to listen, the extra shoulder. We work alongside the medical professionals. We are having extra love in our lives can never ever be a bad thing, and that's what we do. So I'm there also to help facilitate some difficult conversations. I am a death educator as well within this community and to everybody that I work with and support, because we don't know what we don't know. And when it comes to death and dying, it's so emotive, it's still so taboo, we don't talk about it enough. So unfortunately, when people are faced with their own mortality of that or of that of somebody that they're supporting, we haven't got a Scooby-Doo where to start. We haven't got the foggiest idea about what to expect, what's to come. So in steps me. I don't want people to have that surprise of death. I don't want people to not... And that's
your, what don't we want? That is your thing, isn't it? You immediately knew what the answer was to that question. What don't we want? We don't want death to be a surprise. So that's your thing.
Because ironically, it's the only thing that will never be a surprise. Like, it's going to happen to every single person listening to this. Everybody in the whole entire world before us has died. Everybody in front of us will die. Like, this is going to happen. But because it is so hugely, like I said, emotive and challenging and life-changing when we lose somebody, understandably, we've become so divorced and so detached that when us or our people become poorly or something happens, it is a surprise because we've never contemplated it. We've never thought about it. We've never planned or prepared for not if, when this time will come. So a huge part of my motivation is to soften that and bridge that gap between somebody's maybe diagnosis and their death. What happens in between? Because that's the bit that we don't talk about. That's the bit that there isn't much support for. So this is where Soul Midwives come in as that extra to bridge that gap, not just for the practical knowledge and understanding, but for the emotional, mental and spiritual support as well.
And you are sometimes also referred to by others as death doulas, aren't you? There are other people who would identify as death doulas who are doing something similar. But I really love you being a soul midwife. Is that unique to you?
No, that's, like I said, we had the Soul Midwife school. So all of us that train with Felicity are trained soul midwives. You have death doulas, which is the term used by the organisation Living Well, Dying Well. And there's a couple of other different, I know another soul doula school. So people are trained to be soul doulas. And that's my friend and colleague Rachel Field from Eva and Alma. She was a trained soul midwife and has now set up her own school. So there's lots of different training organisations out there. So anybody wanting to work in end-of-life support, it's about finding what works for you, what resonates with you, what sits well, what you understand, what your head and heart go, oh, I get that. So for me, it was the Soul Midwife School, the ethos, the training, the people.
That's so interesting because I've met so many death doulas and I've always come home and said, no. It always feels a bit too kind of wishy-washy. And then I met you and I went home and said, okay, I'll have her. If I'm going to have a death, I'll have her. Yeah. And what I loved about it, and maybe this is to do with your training, maybe it's to do with your background professionally, but I loved that, first of all, I loved your sense of humour. Second of all, I loved your down-to-earth nature. And third of all, I loved that you had all the practical stuff around food and how to die well in a medical sense. So I like that you had those combinations. So anybody who's out there who is looking for a soul midwife, that's what Katie brings, that kind of fun, down to earth. I know that I could swear, I could be completely myself. I wouldn't have to be, however woo I might be as a person in that moment. I might actually just need really practical help. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think that's anybody that works in end of life, whether you call yourself a soul midwife, a doula, however you identify in that sense, wherever you did your training, it is about meeting people where they are at. And we all come with different gifts, experiences. So we are non-denominational overall. So we support all faiths and none. I have a very deep spiritual faith, which works for and soothes and comforts me, but it's certainly not something I put on anybody else. I am there to hear somebody else's thoughts and feelings, or to help somebody explore their feelings about faith, religion, and spirituality.
That's so nice.
So we all have that ethos, but what we all come with then, like I said, is different experience, different skills. So I work also at my local hospice. I've got 10 years of community, palliative and hospice care behind me that I bring to the table. So I do understand the medical jargon. I have had extra training. I have got multiple diplomas, qualifications and everything from death to grief to bereavement to advanced communication skills. I've got the paperwork to back it up. But actually what I bring personally as a soul midwife is that hands-on experience. I know who to call for what the GP will do, what your district nurses will do, what paperwork you need, what form you need to fill out. But again, some soul midwives will come with a huge background in, maybe it is a particular religion. Some soul midwives will come to the table being solicitors and have all that background of academia as well behind them. So we all bring something different to the table.
And I imagine that there's an advocacy role, isn't there? That you're advocating for a person to have the death that they want. Is that true?
Yes, but it's also an important part for us to help that person advocate for themselves in advance. So there is so much paperwork that we can complete to document our wishes. There are so many things we can do in advance to make sure our wishes are known, our feelings about things, whether it be treatment or spirituality or the practicalities of where we might die. There is ways of getting that put in place. So we can either advocate for somebody, but actually a huge part of our ethos is that we want people to remain independent, have that autonomy and that control over their death as long as they need and want to. So it's about me as well coming to the table to go, well, okay, Bob. What?
It's always Bob. I always say Bob. I don't even know many Bobs.
I feel awful when I've done this and I've been in a situation where somebody's gone like, use a different name, please, because I'm Bob. I'm like, so sorry. So, Bob might be talking about that he does or doesn't want to die in a certain place. And I will support Bob to have the conversations with either his people or his healthcare professionals about filling out specific documents like respect forms, which is a medical piece of paper that is used now throughout the whole UK to document our wishes when it comes to end-of-life treatment. I might support Bob to go through that form with his family so he can explain to them why he feels the way he feels and where we're at with that and what he wants to happen or not to happen. So I can then, yes, advocate if I'm with somebody at the bedside to go, this is the kind of music that they wanted. This is the atmosphere that they wanted.
Right.
This is the person they wanted to see. This is how they felt about that. Let's just turn the lighting down, but maybe let's put on Radio 4 because that's what they enjoyed listening to, because that's what they've shared with me when they've created their own death plan with their own choices. So then when they can't communicate that, I can advocate for those choices as well.
That's amazing. I'm sure that a load of our listeners won't even have thought about it. And I do this kind of work, like I'm in this arena, and I haven't really, until you've explained it like that, I haven't really fully understood the value of it. We're going to, never fear, listeners, we're going to get to the end and hear much more about how you can learn more and about new projects that Katie can offer you. So, and we're going to put stuff in the notes as well. So she's going to be able to tell you everything she has to say. I'm going to come to my questions. So the first thing is, what is the best experience of a ceremony that you've ever had? And bear in mind that Katie is also a celebrant, so it might be one of her own ceremony.
Oh, the best example, I thought about this twofold. The best example of ceremonies, if I think about death and then funerals, when it comes to the death, I think the best deaths I've experienced have been where people have had that choice and autonomy that I've just spoken about, where you know that there is so much peace in the room or in and around that person because things have happened in the way that they chose to. Now, that's not to say that death always goes to plan, because believe me, far from it, it doesn't. But the point is somebody has had those conversations that this is what I want. Okay, Bob, that's what you want. What about if we can't make that happen? What about if there is a symptom that needs managing? What about if that person can't get here? What about if we're not allowed that in this environment? So we've explored loads of different options. We've understood, we've shared, there's knowledge, there's information, people are making informed choices. The best deaths I've seen have been when those things have happened, because there isn't that element of surprise, because you've got a rough idea about the plans that you want and as and when and if we can make it happen. So then the things that we are absolutely desperate for, if we really can't do it, we already know that in advance. There isn't that
plan B. I never thought of having a plan B.
And D and E, to have a whole host of options. And you can have things. Another funeral director that I've worked with, and she always says this with her families, and I use it a lot in death and in funerals. But to all of us, we have things like right in the palm of our hand that are absolutely non-negotiable in life and so in death. So we have things that actually you go, I absolutely do not want this. But whatever happens, the only thing I absolutely have to have is this.
Yeah, so that's kind of the premise of this. It's exactly right. I think you find that out in celebrancy as well, don't you? I do not want black, or I do not want classical music. Absolutely. And that's such a great place to start, isn't it? That's the power of the question.
And I agree with the whole ethos of what you're doing. I often say to people, it is so much easier sometimes to identify what we don't want. Because it's when I in a whole lifetime ago, I used to work in retail, right? And we used to have mystery shoppers. And when we get the results, we then get all the psychology behind what we need to achieve and blah, blah, blah. But statistically, if somebody has a good experience, they will, on average, tell 3 people. If somebody has a bad experience, they will tell 10 people. So we are very quick to share and hear and understand and take in the negative in our lives because it has a different impact on us than the positive. So that's why these things are sometimes inbuilt in us as to why we can identify straight away, I don't want this.
Oh, yes, that makes sense.
Creates a different feeling that we attach differently to.
Yes. So we're more aware of that need.
Yeah, exactly. So again, I went slightly off tangent there. But
this is going to happen. That's all part of the game. We don't mind the tangent.
Okay, good. But that's why it's easy to identify. And if we start with those non-negotiables of, I absolutely do not want this, but I do want that, but that absolutely cannot happen. I don't want that person there, maybe. Or I absolutely have to be buried. Don't ever cremate me. Something so seemingly simple, but a very quick decision gives us a starting point. So as far as the best ceremonies and the best death, it's come from those decision making, that information sharing, where people then have had those non-negotiables met in some way. It's where they have, because what happens when people do talk and do share, what happens in that dynamic is you end up giving each other a gift. So the person that's dying, if they say to their person that's supporting them, I absolutely want nothing but classical music playing the whole way through my death, and I absolutely have to be cremated for my funeral. They've given themselves a gift by sharing that, to know that actually when their time comes, that if it's that important to them, they know it's going to happen because they've shared it. And it's like, thank goodness I've said that. They know what I want. I can rest easy. They've given their person a gift so that when they die or when the time comes that person may have to make that decision for them, they can go with peace in their heart. I know what they wanted.
Oh my God, you're so brilliant. You're so brilliant at explaining. And for the record, I don't want classical music. So just bear that in mind if I go first. And you are going to be my soul midwife, just so you know.
But again, you've gifted yourself of, that's really important to me, I don't want it. You've gifted me as a professional and friend, but as a professional to go, that's already a tool now that I understand to not use to support you. You will also then gift your partner, your family, your friends to go, she absolutely didn't want that. I know I can do this for her, because you give them a gift by them being able to do something for or not for you.
I love this. And I love it because people will say, I don't want to bother them. I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to upset them. And that really turns that on the head, doesn't it? That you asking and talking about it is a good thing. I think that's really, really nice.
And also, the reason sometimes people don't want to talk is because they will say something like, oh, well, I can't ask Bob that. He's dying. He'll get upset. And we're all so different. Some people don't want to talk. This isn't about making everybody talk and sharing. Some people don't want to. That's their way. We meet them where they're at. But don't assume that Bob doesn't want to talk, because actually, two things to think about. Maybe he needs permission to talk. Maybe he doesn't know how to open up that conversation. Maybe he may struggle to talk about it because he's got no one to talk about it with. The other thing to think about is that if you're going to assume that you can't talk to somebody because it's going to upset them, actually it's three things. Second thing, they're already dying. Chances are the worst thing to them is already happening.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, they are going to be upset about the fact they're dying. By having another day or another moment of tears or anger or frustration is not necessarily going to make it worse. It may actually open up again a floodgate to release some more emotion. And that's never a bad thing.
I always think that about grief as well. Carry on. What was number 3?
Sorry, number 3 is that actually, is it you that feels awkward or them? Because quite often we'll go, I can't talk to them and upset them about it. It's because you want to either get things wrong by saying the wrong words. You have your own feelings and emotions, maybe anticipatory grief. You have your own stuff and you have your own experiences in those moments of conversations. So it may be you then that actually goes, I feel awkward and upset by having this conversation.
Yeah, but absolutely. It's interesting because I made some exactly this. This makes sense because we're very aligned. I made some reels about that very thing, about how by asking somebody how they are, how they're feeling with their grief, you are absolutely not going to make it worse because the worst has happened. So I made a reel about that. And then there was the other one, like that thing about it's assuming that you shouldn't try not to make assumptions about, because it's actually their call. you're denying them that freedom, aren't you? And the autonomy that you talked about. And it's not your call to decide for that person what they can and can't cope with.
Exactly.
So that's really interesting.
But that's also another reason why people will come to me as an outsider coming in. If family members, if you don't have the family dynamic relationship where you are able to, as some might say, speak in that honest or free way, you get somebody else to do it for you. So, you know, so therefore, not only then do I come with the professional tools to support and facilitate those conversations, I'm also a little bit of a scapegoat, but I'm okay with that because it holds that. But I am genuinely, because I can hold space for somebody, and I can hold space, and I have done in many difficult situations where families might be arguing, there's real deep, heavy, challenging emotions, and I can sit in amidst it all because I get to step out of that. Energetically, spiritually, I work on that separately, later on. But in those moments, I am not emotionally attached the same way that somebody else might be. So I'm happy to be that scapegoat if it allows these conversations to happen, if that's what people want.
You can be the bad guy, like, oh, she made us talk about it, that awful woman. She made us talk about it.
Yeah.
What about ceremonies? If you've got something else to add.
No, only that there's an amazing doctor and a lady that I'm very chuffed to call a friend, and I like to name drop. Her.
You're my name drop. You are my name drop.
No. Dr. Catherine Mannix is an author and a palliative doctor. So she's written some of the most incredible books. 2 books, one called With the End in Mind, and the other one is called Listen. She's a huge advocate for death doulas and soul midwives as well. She absolutely can see how we can bridge that gap. I forgot, where was I going with this? It was something
about
she
choices
said.
And assumptions and making it somebody else's decision, and
I'll come back to that. Either way,
that is my fault. I put you off.
No. It's maybe I was meant to. But I put her books out there because they are incredible to anybody professionally working in death and dying, or anybody that is going through something. And I'll come back to that.
It's about being the bad guy, Katie. It was about not minding being the bad guy in the room and, you know, being the scapegoat and being the dreadful person that made them talk. Is it gone?
Gone.
If we come back, and that's fine. Have you got any... Maybe you could bribe her to come on the podcast. That would be really cool.
Well, I'm actually meeting with her in a couple of weeks.
Oh my God, to say. But this is an amazing podcast. No, that would be really good. So, ceremonies. Have you done or been to a ceremony that's been really amazing?
Yes. So what comes to mind with that is one particular ceremony where a gentleman was buried in his back garden, which is absolutely allowed. A lot of people go, didn't know you could do that. Yes, you can be buried in your own land. You have to have the landowner's permission and be a certain amount of meters away from a water source. Obviously, water source, decomposing body, but from the science, nature part of it. It's true. But so anyway, this gentleman's service, he was buried at home. It was every element of the service was absolutely bespoke. There was caterers, there was chair hire people, there was marquees, there was webcast, there was sound people, it was a proper event. Now, not to say, I know that having a huge event isn't everybody's cup of tea, and there's finances, there's logistics, there's a lot to think about. But it wasn't almost all of that made it so amazing. It was the fact that every element was so personal. The speeches, the music, the way it was done, the coffin, what was on top of the coffin, what was in the marquee, what people wore, the stories they shared, the music, every element of it was absolutely chosen for him by his family. And then also it was a team effort. And it was so good, not because of how grand it may have seemed. It was so good because it was so personal. And actually another ceremony that I did, which was a 30-minute slot at a crematorium, which is very much your kind of standard funeral. That's what most people have. And it really works for some people, and that's what some people choose. Some people don't know that you have other choices. Even in those 30 minutes, I've done some most amazing ceremonies, and for exactly the same reason, because they've been personal. The music, the colour, the theme. I think that's what's made some ceremonies special, is even if you only have 30 minutes, you can still make it the most incredible 30 minutes. You can still make it about storytelling, sharing, celebrating your person, allowing space for grief, but still celebrating and allowing some joy in the process. And sometimes there's been a theme. whether it be colour or a topic, or there was one that I did where it was all about Guns N' Roses. So everyone kind of wore like leathers, and there was like, all the music was Guns N' Roses. It was real kind of heavy, high energy, but that was absolutely appropriate for that person.
I had a Harry Potter one once, and that was the whole thing, like Hedwig's theme on the cello, and then even the thing I had, like, you know, the folder, I made it bespoke with Gryffindor badges on it and all of those things. So it is really incredible what you can do. What about a bad one, like the worst experience? And you can talk about death or ceremony, whatever, or both.
I think the worst, again, it's a accumulation of things. So if I think about funerals first, the worst situations I've had at funerals is then been the complete opposite, where there is no choice, there is no personality, there is no identity. And it is sadly where somebody, either religious or not, whoever's leading the service, maybe it is a template script. Maybe it is religious and the person wasn't. Or maybe they were religious, but they didn't have any religion added in, because it should be about the person. So some of the worst ceremonies, or the most heartbreaking ceremonies I've been to, have been because that person has not been honoured in the way that they so rightly needed and deserved. Or then the horror stories of people getting names wrong, people getting really important information wrong, of children's names being forgotten, one children out of 2 being forgotten, and all of those awful things. Because the funeral has a huge impact on that person's journey with grief. But if we are not having the service that is right for our person, it hugely...
Can you hear that noise?
A little bit, yeah.
I think a tree is being felled. Try and ignore.
That's what happened with me when I was recording my trading content the other day.
So it's the same thing. Anyway, carry on. Yes.
Yeah,
agree.
The worst ceremonies have been when people are not honoured or respected or celebrated in the way that they deserve. And it is when either things go wrong, when the personal details aren't there, and actually when people aren't given the choice to have choices, when people aren't explained that, okay, so does this poem work for you? If somebody is going to have a template, why are we not, I don't know, why are we not just asking for more information? Everything I do, and I know you do too as a funeral celebrant, is so unique, so individual, so bespoke every single time.
That's right. And it's really hard to explain that to the listeners if they're not involved in what we do, that it literally is not, we're not exaggerating. It is the case that after 10 years, every single funeral I've ever done has been different, and every person has been unique. It doesn't sound possible, but it's true.
I absolutely agree. And because I know it and do it myself, my 10 years of death care, every death has been different.
Really?
When it comes down to the worst deaths or the worst situations, it's not, some people I know would assume that it's because there is an element of trauma, or it's been particularly difficult, or there has been something really challenging, like a complex symptom. Because death itself is safe, but the dying bit is what challenges us. And that's the bit that we don't necessarily know about, or that something's happened out of our control. Clinically, medically, our bodies can do stuff that we're not prepared for, depending on the illness or reason that we're dying. But actually, even when there has been something really tricky or complex to deal with, the death itself has still been a beautiful or magical experience. So when I talk about things that are not necessarily a bad death, but where things haven't gone either as you would hope for that person, it normally comes down to the lack of conversation, the lack of opportunities to talk, to share, to say things that you wish you would have said before, that then it's too late. The things that and the unanswered questions, the stress and anxiety that comes from not knowing is huge. So for the person that's dying, if anything, I don't necessarily actually believe there is such thing as a bad death, because I think nature and our bodies know what to do, and it's not always as we want or hope, and some tricky things do happen. But if we talked and understood beforehand, if it is a case of somebody has an illness, for example, where they may, I'm trying not to be too icky, where they may bleed from the mouth, for example, which is, it's something like that. There are ways, if we have talked about and understood why, if that happens, we can be prepared with things like having dark towels instead of white ones.
Oh, so really? That's so clever. That's so clever. Actually, it's interesting because one of the few things that tormented me about my mother's death was that she would bleed from her nostrils, and it used to haunt me in my sleep. And I feel like you would have had some kind of practical answer for that, which is, and so what you're saying is you don't want our listeners to be afraid. So when we're talking about worst or bad, we're not talking about death or any kind of inevitability around that. It's just like how to have a good experience is what's interesting. The next question I've got might be a bit tricky. I don't know. I made it and I'm not sure if I could answer it myself. And it is, what do you regret about ceremonies or life transitions in your own life? Whatever, wedding, anything that you've had.
I don't necessarily have regrets about the decisions I've made or the life events, because I do genuinely think that everything I've gone through has led to me being who I am and where I'm at now. The only thing that I wish I maybe had paid more attention to was that inner wisdom.
Oh, I know, that gut instinct. It took me so long. I don't know about you, but it took me so long to locate that feeling and trust it. I think I'm still learning. Are you?
I think we are. Absolutely we are. And when I think about some huge things in my life that maybe have caused me a level of trauma or that have been really challenging, that I've really had to heal and grow through, if I look back, there was something already in my gut going,
every time. Every single time. And sometimes it takes years after the realization that something has gone wrong. It takes years to remember the event at which you felt that instinct. That happened to me very recently. That's so interesting. So go with your instincts. Everybody, please trust your instincts. It's so important.
We think like to have, I use the language intuition or inner wisdom.
Yeah, me too.
Reaction, gut instinct. Whatever it is, whatever you want to call it, we talk about things like energy and there's quantum physics and faith and whatever you call it, it's something and it exists. And
everyone has it.
Yes. How it comes up for you, I think, is unique. So to me, it is like a little voice. It's a little voice that goes, Katie, really? Are we? and I might not go, oh, Katie, stop worrying. And I need but because I talk very much and I go with my head and I go with my heart and my gut, but my head will kick in and I go, don't overthink it. But it's not, it's that voice going, hello, got a bit of a feeling about this that you're not paying attention to. And that's it. As far as, like I said, regret, I don't necessarily regret what I've gone through because I have managed to find a healing and growth through it. And doesn't mean I like it, doesn't mean I'm happy about it, doesn't mean that I'm all zen about it. Some things just suck and I wish I'd never done it. So I wish I'd never had to do it, but I did. And I'm trying to own that as in my own healing. But when I look back, I'm not going to call it a regret, but when I look back, if there are things that I could have maybe tweaked or changed, it would have been to honour those things that were coming up for me.
Yeah, that's so nice. Yeah. What about opposite things? Like something you're really glad you did or didn't do for your life transition?
Same thing.
Yeah,
listen to
following your gut. Yeah.
Like we were talking about, there's recent things in my personal and professional life with my career, things that I've been sat on for ages, where my gut and that little voice has always been like, come on, get your bum in gear. We know this is what we need to do. But life, imposter syndrome, trauma, stuff, whatever gets thrown on top of it and you go, oh, I won't. I'll leave it. I'm not feeling motivated. I've got too much on right now. I'll wait till that situation is better. I'll wait till that happens. We're never ready for big life changes.
That's right.
Having a child. No one's ever ready to have a child because you could always have more money, a different house, a different car, a different partner. But things happen in our lives. Doesn't mean we're always ready to go and handle it with gusto and nothing's ever going to go wrong.
But your good moments are where you have actually handled it with gusto and just thought, okay, come what may, I'm doing this thing. I'll live with it. Okay.
Pause. I had listened to that voice and that little Katie on my shoulder. I mean, come on. And there's something in me then that goes, yeah, do you know what? And I've just done it. And
right. She's like, you're right.
Yeah. She's always right.
She's always right.
This is the thing. It's only when my head gets in the way and I question it that when I look back at the things I would change, it'd be that I wish I'd have listened. But when I think about the things that have gone well, that are going well, and the changes that are happening, it is because I have listened to that. And also that conviction and the trust, not just in myself, but also with other people, rather than me going, oh, but what's that person going to think? Are people going to worry about this? How that's going to be perceived? some of the best things I've done in life is when I stopped worrying about what I do and how that lands with other people.
Yeah, and not being responsible for that, not making assumptions about that as well, and also just trusting them to deal with it or not. So I've got a little question here about your background and your story, and you have already really answered that. Did you train as a nurse, or how did you get into hospice care? What happened?
Well, I was in retail initially. That's where I started. I've always loved people. In retail as a manager, at one point I had like 80 staff. I had lots of £1 million turnovers. I was, doing really well.
What were you selling?
I worked for a fashion brand selling clothes.
Really?
And yeah,
I had not seen that coming. So that's something to remember. And it's interesting because we all celebrants come from completely different places. That is not, and now you've said it, I completely see how you would have been really good at it, but I didn't know that at all. So how did you end up in a hospice?
Well, it was actually, again, life. I was always that child that was a bit woo-woo, and I use the term woo-woo lovingly. I'm happy.
Me too.
This is woo-woo, I love it. I was always the kid who's into crystals or star signs and personality things, psychology. I always loved people. Worked in retail, loved people, loved my team, loved the people I worked with. And then just life changes. I started to tap into more of my spirituality. I always felt like I wanted to do something. Do something with the world. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to do something. Part of me thought it might have been on TV, which there was
I feel
another.
like it still will be.
Oh, I love a chat show.
I feel like you'll be on a chat show for sure. You'll be on Oprah before we know where we are.
I will be.
Actually, you saw her here first, okay? She was on this podcast before she made it to Oprah.
That would be a great chat, wouldn't it?
It's going to happen. Sure.
But yeah, so anyway, knew I wanted to do something, and then just life changed, and I was in a situation with my son needing to earn more money. So after I'd had him, I wasn't in management in retail anymore. I dropped to just part-time, and I'd also taken up a role in care. And basically, a very long story short, I realised how aligned I was, how good at it I was, and how much my heart knew and spoke to me with every person that I worked with. So everywhere I went, people would die. I knew instinctively what to do, how to do it, how to feel. I recognised my soul suddenly speaking to me, shouting and screaming at me like, finally, you're listening. I swear my angels constantly look like this.
Me too. I had this thing where I suddenly felt, for the first time in my life, really unapologetic about making a decision that I'd made. And the person who was impacted by that decision for me not being apologetic actually mentioned to a friend and said, I really thought she'd be more apologetic about that. I was like, apologetic about what? And it's just really, that was a massive, I know exactly what you mean when you think, okay, so it was that simple for your whole life. Oh, that's really amazing. So we've talked a little bit about your story about what we don't want. We don't want our deaths to be a surprise. And that's brilliant. So tell us now about your big passion project and what it is that you're currently doing. And I was there at the beginning. I'm not gloating or anything, but I am in a Costa over a massive, really quite unpleasant coffee, talking about Katie's new project. And it really is the best thing. And I think I really just want the whole world to know about it because I feel that you will all really benefit from it. So take the floor and tell us all about it.
Well, I'm hoping by the time this comes out, everything will be up and running anyway. So this is all I'm so close to getting it all available and ready. So just a bit of background, I guess. Soul Midwives, we have our own training that we go through to become Soul Midwives. What we also then created was like a really watered down version of that called TLC training, which is where we offered understanding about the dying journey from a Soul Midwife's perspective, where everyone can learn a bit more about death and dying. So I've been training that actively for now a couple of years. Love it. I've done it in person and I've done it online. What I also do in part of my work as a death educator is I host monthly sessions, monthly, 4 or 6 weeks online, which is called Dying for a Cuppa.
Which is a very cool name. I'm very impressed by that. Did it take a long time to come up with that?
It was actually me and another soul midwife about 4 years ago for Dying Matters Week, hosted an event and we called it Dying for a Cuppa. So what then I did in COVID, because obviously we were doing it face to face, and it went down really well, and then it wouldn't. Obviously, it was COVID, so I took it online. I also then got it trademarked because people were starting to wanting to pinch it, and my ego didn't want that, but my soul was like, Katie, this is going to be big. Like, you're going to do something with this, so keep it. So I got it trademarked. So I've been hosting regular Dying for a Cuppers just on Facebook Live for about 30 minutes a time, every 4 or 6 weeks, where I share information about death and dying. I talk about it from the practical perspectives, what it looks like. I talk about what people might need to know, the paperwork, the deeper emotional stuff, some of the woo-woo, loads of different topics. And there's about 34 sessions at the moment now that are available on my Facebook page. So now what I've done is I've created Dying for a Cuppa, the Masterclass. So this is an accredited training. So this is CPD hours from a professional perspective.
Which means, is that continuing professional development, just for our listeners? Yeah.
Yeah. So, and to have it accredited means also that my plan at the moment, and I'm in conversations with people rolling it out into different healthcare settings as well, because they can use it and get funding for their CPD stuff for their staff. But anyway, I don't want to go too much down that road because I've got a lot of work to do. But so what I've done is created the Masterclass, which is basically a one-stop shop for everything you need for your death education. So I have created, there's 4 parts to it at the moment. There's the part that is a free downloadable document, which is called Me, My Care and I, which is a spiritual care document that you can use, which everybody will have access to document your thoughts, feelings about what scares you, what soothes you, what's important to you, who you are, your pets, your hobbies, all the holistic stuff about who you are. And that will be free for everybody. I then have a workbook, a Dying for a Cuppa Masterclass workbook, that will be downloadable, which is just the workbook, which goes through some key information about different topics with some extra added bonus material as well. Although I'm not quite sure what we'll do with the bonus material yet, so not sure where that will be. Then we have the main masterclass, which is about 3.5 to 4 hours worth of videos, of training, of sharing, of understanding, of me talking, that works alongside the workbook with note sections, and the additional bonus stuff will be in there. And it is literally, you've got checklists, you've got A to Zs, you've got diagrams, you've got everything. You've got everything that anybody could need to look after a dying person. And it talks to you very much about the body. We go through what the body goes through, some of the key things about why people don't eat or drink, why they look different. We talk about how to communicate. I talk about different emotions and the awarenesses. It's a huge project that I've been working on to incorporate my 10 years experience under one roof. So it will be, like I said, interactive, a work alongside at your own pace with information, everything you need to know. Then, if you are a professional, celebrant, death educator, whatever, doula person, if you want to learn more, I've then also got a masterclass for the professionals, which is coaching and mentoring with me in a couple of videos and a couple of sessions one-to-one, where then you can up your game as regards working in end of life, how you want to work in end of life, finding your path, figuring out what's going to work for you. So Dying for a Cuppa, the Masterclass, is my current baby that hopefully, like I said, by the time this comes out, will be completely up and running and available on the website.
I have honestly got aching cheeks from smiling. I'm nearly in tears. People always, you must support your people, because when you support your people, it feels amazing. I am so excited for you. You should be so proud of yourself. And it just sounds so incredibly helpful. And you are definitely going to be doing what you said and making a difference in the world. I mean, it's a lot. It's a really huge body of work, and people are going to love it, and you'll be brilliant at it.
Oh, thank you. I've been sat on it for about 1.5 years. I've had the ideas, it's been growing, it's been evolving, and it's finally, as all this is coming to place, the main reason it's happened is, again, like when me and you met, we made this agreement. Why are we sitting on this stuff? Why are we procrastinating? Why are we taking ages to make a decision about something that our little souls and our little people on our shoulders are going, hello, come on. So we made that commitment to just do it, and that's exactly what's happened. So when you make that commitment and you trust yourself and you surrender to that, now all these things come and they flow so much freer. It's like, you know, you get your own way.
Yeah. It's hard, isn't it? It's a hard thing. So where can people find that information? And we will put everything in the show notes as well, but where do people go to find out about it, how much it costs, what they can do, where the free downloads are, etc.?
It will all be on my website. That's the next little bit that I'm working on now, is the technical stuff, which is not my forte. But thank goodness Wix, who I do my website through, are brilliant. But it will all be on there. So I will have a section on there that obviously, I think at the moment I have to do it where people will sign in and log in, and then they can get a lifetime access to the videos and download the right and appropriate stuff depending on what they sign up.
What is the address of your website?
It is www.katiesoulmidwife.com. So
KTC.
KATIE letter C soulmidwife.com.
So I told you she was good. So I've got one last question, which is, I'm just so absolutely thrilled that you were willing to spend time with me, and I just think you're amazing. I'm just so flattered. So what would be really sweet would be, and I think you've probably answered this by talking about your project, but what makes you really hopeful for the future? I want this podcast to bring people hope in a world where nothing feels hopeful. So if you've got any tips about, for you, what makes you hopeful, that would be really helpful.
The really cheesy answer, but as soon as I saw that question, the first word that came to mind was humanity.
Right.
People make me hopeful. I know we've all got our own trauma, crosses to bear, stuff we've experienced. And trust me, I've met some not very nice people. And there are some people out there that struggle in life and that are mean and don't have people's best interests at heart. However, the majority of people that I spend time with genuinely give me faith and hope in humanity and life. What I see from human beings when they're with their people that are dying, or the people that are grieving for somebody they love at a funeral, like we are inbuilt with hope and love. That's what we come with. So that's what makes me hopeful, was that actually the majority, 99.9% of people that I've encountered in my life have been good, loving, hopeful people.
Same here.
How we live it. And I've got my own traumas and upset and growth and healing, and but my glass has always been half full. And some people would say I'm a bit naive. Some people would say I look through the world through rose-tinted glasses. But do you know what? If I can face death and look at death and work with death every single day, see people die every day, see the traumatic and difficult situations that can surround death, if I can be amidst the deep, heavy grief and the really difficult, challenging emotions that we go through, and I still think people are inherently good and kind and loving and full of hope, then I don't see why other people can't.
I love that. And that is what this podcast is for. It's life affirming, because we know as celebrants that there are all these amazing things and these amazing people. And if you read the papers, you wouldn't know they were there. So I'm really hope that brings people fresh hope. Oh my goodness. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Well, no, just you saying about the papers. When I said earlier about the mystery shoppers and the good and the bad experience, that's exactly the prime example of what I'm talking about. So if somebody has a good experience, they tell 3 people. They have a bad one, they tell 10. Because people listen. The news is not going to report about all the lovely, fluffy, wonderful things that happens in the world, because that doesn't get people's attention, because we don't connect that in the same way that we do the negative or the difficult stuff, which baffles me. But I think it's because we are inherently emotional beings, and we cling on to the stuff that hits the hardest, and that unfortunately is the negative stuff. So then, because we become so attached to that, we forget about all the positive, lighter, softer, calmer, joyful feelings that we have and experience. And that's why we all need to focus more on the gratitude. So we do sit in those feelings and remember that as difficult and dark as some things are, there's the softness and light on every other side of it as well.
I mean, I could not agree more. And I think our work, we're really lucky, because the work we do exposes us to the human spirit, and Absolutely. It enables us to understand that the human spirit is a really fascinating and strong thing. And yes, there are circumstances in life that make us really vulnerable and where we don't feel strong at all, and that's perfectly normal. I'm not suggesting that we're all fine or we all survive everything that we suffer, but even in that, there will always be something beautiful about a person and how they faced that sadness or isolation or whatever it was that they lived through. So be hopeful, everybody. I give you Katie, Soul Midwife. I'm absolutely over the moon that she's here. I can't believe it. Over the moon. That's something my mum would have said. Over the moon. I'm over the moon. So that's it for today. And I really can't wait to introduce you to some more inspiring and hopeful, fantastic people. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you.